Do you remember Jacinda saying like, it's absolutely segregation, and we are the Ministry of Truth, and it's just like, what we've allowed with this trust that is completely unwarranted and also kind of ironic because like it's Satoshi's opening remarks is like unwarranted trust in the system to not do exactly what they continually do. But we just find ourselves towards that end of that road. And that trust is just going to deteriorate so freaking quick, especially if, Cody, they don't take your bridge and try to bridge that gap.
Hello, I am codyellingham, and this is the Transformation of Value podcast. In this episode, I catch up again with Ben Jarvie, a writer and Kiwi Bitcoiner working for Amber App, a Bitcoin-only exchange. We talk about Ben's recent travels to El Salvador and Madeira, and we reflect on the declining situation of my beloved home country, New Zealand, and in particular the economic violence that the state and the Reserve Bank of New Zealand continues to unleash upon the people through its egregious manipulation of the money. But that said, we know that Bitcoin fixes this, and we are here to build bridges and meet people where they are at. If you have any questions or feedback, please reach out. My emails are always open, hello@thetransformationofvalue.com. Otherwise, on to the show. How you been, Ben?
Yeah, really good, brother. Really good. Working on some cool stuff that I'm really excited about.
Yeah.
Been very fortunate to go to, Madeira and El Salvador recently. So
Yeah.
really, really stoked with how everything's been going. How about yourself?
Yeah, I've been going good, man. Reflecting on a lot of things. I did want to sort of start maybe by jumping into Madeira and El Salvador, because I sort of was following at a distance your journey there. I wish I could have gone. But how was it? Which one did you go to first?
So we did Madeira first, and that was awesome, brother. What a cool place. It's like a culmination of New Zealand and Hawaii and like Italy, I guess you'd kind of say.
Is it?
So
It's part of Portugal, right? It's like a free state of Portugal or something.
yeah, I don't know about free, but it is a part of Portugal, and it has to sort of abide by EU regulations, which are quite restrictive. But it's really cool that they've sort of got this sort of Bitcoin beachish type of local community that are starting to try to pick it up and run with it. I think the difference being, they're not a quote unquote third world country or underdeveloped country, which means that they have quite stringent regulations that they have to sort of abide by and sort of try and navigate. But, therein lies the challenge and the fun.
Yeah. So how long were you over there for?
So I was in Madeira for 10 days, and, we rented a place out with some good Bitcoiner friends, and my wife and I didn't even end up going to the conference. We just did the satellite events and went hiking through the conference. So that was really good fun to actually get a feel of what it would be like to live there, which is kind of why I went to Madeira and El Salvador to begin with, because you really want to sort of immerse yourself in that sort of area, especially when there's really competent people that will, push you to strive further.
Yeah. So what were your takeaways then in terms of quality of life, the opportunity to maybe relocate to somewhere like Madeira?
I think Madeira, being in Europe, it was, and a small island with a largely older population, the cost of living wasn't great. It wasn't enticing. The level of the Bitcoin community is phenomenal in the sense that they have sovereign engineering over there, which is a course that I wanted to do, and maybe will do at some stage if I manage to make the time for it. So that would be the large draw over there, as if you're a dev or want to be dev, and you want to learn how all of those tools work further and have some amazing mentors. That's the place to go.
Yeah. And it would obviously be Euro generally besides Bitcoin. People were using Euro for transactions, or
Yeah,
so
it was predominantly Euro. There's a few places that we're actually able to spend, and but it's always good fun to go to these places where you get to spend. I don't know what it's like for you where you are, but there's just something nice about spending sovereign money.
Yeah. Well, actually, I've been working on a project. It's not quite ready for it's not a public launch, but I've been working on a project where I am based now, in the south of Tokyo in Japan. Actually working with a local cafe to get them onto Bitcoin, and they're very close by to where I am, and so I'm sort of looking to do like 1 day a week as kind of the Bitcoin day. So I've already got them set up with point of sale, and they're really happy with that. And they're really into permaculture. Are you familiar with permaculture? So like,
Not where I'd be confident in saying yes, but loosely in the sense that it's like,
it's a funny thing because from New Zealand, it sort of actually is pretty much just normal that it's like, having a garden, growing your own food, trying to like not use too much plastic stuff and
yeah,
kind of keep it, organic and legitimate in terms of food and just your quality of life, having, some compost out the back, these kinds of things. And again, like New Zealand, Australia, it's like everyone just does that sort of thing anyway. But for super city people, it's actually quite a foreign concept. So there's this name called permaculture, and it's got a whole body of work behind it in terms of building off-grid housing, capturing local water, river flows to make electricity, kind of like all of these citadel thinking kind of ideas that we talk about in Bitcoin. So there's actually a huge crossover with permaculture and Bitcoin.
sweet.
And this cafe, they're really into permaculture. So they got Bitcoin straight away. And
Yeah,
they're kind of friends of mine. So I was like, okay, well, look, we'll see it with some self-sovereign money. So you're not touching the filthy Japanese yen. And
which isn't doing too well.
yeah, well, it's good for you and me, but it's not so great for the locals who are trying to travel overseas or import things.
Or save.
Yeah, well, you could never save. I mean, I've been deflationary for 30 years, so there's no
Yeah,
interest rate in the bank accounts or anything. But I just said, hey, why don't you just start accepting Sats? So I'm just getting them beginning to do it. So they've already actually taken payments in Sats.
sweet. What kind of POS system did you have for them?
We've just got it set up with a custodial wallet on an iPad for now, but
Okay.
I think once they're ready and they've got a bit more volume, I want to graduate them to a self-custodial system.
So,
Yeah, so it's sort of early days at the moment, but they're really keen to hold the Bitcoin as well, which is a big difference. Trying to cash it out, that's when you enter into sort of difficult territory sometimes.
yeah,
But that's just a little project of mine, man, is to just kind of spread the love there. And
that's awesome.
yeah,
I was
thank you.
thinking with those places, with the POS systems, it would be great if these people not only were able to receive and store their own Bitcoin, but also to sell it using Azteco or something where it's as easy as just printing a receipt, the person scans it, you make a 3%, fee off of that. Hey, I'd like a coffee and, $500 worth of sats, please.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there is, unfortunately, I need to do a bit more deep diving, but there is a bit of sort of a grey zone in Japan in particular. I know Azteco, there are people doing it, but I do know some people have had issues doing it. And just the compliance and the government do come down like a ton of bricks. Unfortunately, this is what the state likes to do. So when you're receiving and using it for transactions, it's fine. But when you are in that money transmission role, and someone goes and rats you out, then you are in the shit. So it's sort of, I know what you're saying, but I'm also like, well, I'll have to probably look into it a bit closer so that nobody gets in trouble with the feds.
Yeah.
However,
Yeah,
it
so
doesn't really matter. We're going to receive Bitcoin for coffees, and I'm hoping to set up. There's a bit of a farmers market community around here. I'm sort of longer term would like to see it so that we could actually get this place buying some of its ingredients in sats. And even like the coffee beans and things. So I've been looking at sort of sources for something like El Salvadorian coffee,
sweet.
these kinds of things. But come back to your story, Ben. So you've been to Madeira and then El Salvador. How long were you over there? How was that? Like, tell me all about it.
Sure. So I went to the Meme Factory's halving party
Okay.
because that sort of resonates with me a bit more than like, I'm going to go watch all these people speak. It's just like, no, I just want to catch up with plebs for like, the halving party. And you know that they're solid Bitcoiners generally because they're going to El Salvador. There's obviously the odd few that you got to be, a bit wary of with where the conversations lead and a bit of entrapment, but that's to be expected. But I really enjoyed it. So when you get there, they're like, "Oh, you're a Kiwi, you can go on that line." And you don't have to pay any fee or anything. They're like, "Oh, we've been seeing a few of you lately.
Yeah.
Hope you enjoy your time." Super positive about it. But everyone else had to pay this fee to get into the country, but you could pay in sats.
Yeah.
And then, straight away you arrive and there's this guy, Pierre from the Orange Pill Driver, and he'll pick you up at the airport. And then if you're new to Bitcoin, he'll, have a video and ask you a question or two and put that up on his marketing. But it's really cool in the sense that your first thing you're paying with sats for your taxi ride to get to the party. And then, the humidity is crazy. But you're just paying with sats everywhere you go. Your hotels, your food, like everywhere you went, you had the option to sort of pay. Well, at least I did. So your tomahawks, everything you want. And it's really cheap too. So I was speaking to a few people to try and get like a lay of the land. And they were saying that, we came this time last year and there was no sewage, there was no concrete roads. So you're seeing this rapid development in El Salvador, as we know, with their GDP and paying off their debt from the IMF and stuff like that, but also in terms of actually developing the sort of cities. So Alzonte has sort of come quite far in just a year. So it'll be amazing to see where it is in another year or three.
Well, along those lines, I've been reading Broken Money by Lynn
Hmm.
Alden, which is an incredible just study, monograph of money as a concept. And I think it sits alongside the Bitcoin standard. It sits alongside, all of these classic economics texts. And what really stood out to me, just where I'm at in the book, is this connection between soft and hard money and infrastructure and the state of a country. And
Hmm.
I've had these conversations with various people in New Zealand around just the dire state of New Zealand's roads, infrastructure. You talk about sewage. I mean, Wellington, you've got shit spewing out onto the streets, literally the capital city. You've got 100-year-old pipes and these kinds of memes of what New Zealand has become. And yet that wasn't always the case. And there was a time, once upon a time, where it wasn't exactly a gold standard, but as you know, there was a peg to the British pound and to the gold standard, and that was back in the 19th century, and New Zealand was built. This concept of infrastructure was brought to the country, and now we're seeing the reverse of that in New Zealand, and it's El Salvador that's in this
Yeah.
journey of actually, developing infrastructure in layers. And I don't know, there's just something interesting because it's been so long. We've been under this shit money standard for so long that we've forgotten what it's like to have progress.
Yeah.
And
It's one
it's
of those
almost,
things
yeah,
where it's like, when the money's not scarce, everything else will be, whether that's competent labor or goods and services. And so the more that the money becomes diluted, the more people become extractive and high time preference. And that sort of stems from the head down.
yeah. And I'm still, yeah, I mean, I'm doing a lot of thinking about this, sort of going for long walks through the bamboo groves, considering what is actually going on. But this idea of progress, of stagnation, of the multiple histories within a single nation, of we think we have this story of like what New Zealand is, and actually today I was in a cafe and I could sort of hear a New Zealand accent, some guy local who's sort of moved here, and I sort of thought, what does New Zealand mean to me? And this is sort of a question I'm asking. I've been on the road for 6 months now, sort of traveling, and I come back, I call it sort of homesick or whatever, but, there is a point, as you probably know, when you've traveled, you get to a certain point and you sort of, the travel, the accelerationism of sort of traveling and being out there is sort of wears off and you're like, okay, well, where have I come from? And you start thinking about this stuff. And have you been back to New Zealand at all, been in the last little while?
Yeah, I went back for a birthday last year. And it was weird, hey, because
Yeah,
you go back and it's like nothing's changed. Like everyone's sort of living for the weekend. They're still doing, the job that they hate, and they're still just trying to pay off their mortgage and stuff. And it was just kind of a bit depressing. I don't know if that's just, my friend group or family. Some of them, obviously, this is a bit of a generalization. Um, but yeah, it's just like you come back and I wasn't allowed to talk about COVID or anything,
yeah, yeah,
which is hilarious because, I got them to set their own lines in the sand, which they crossed. And so
yeah.
because they did that, like it's a taboo topic that's no longer allowed to be talked about.
Well,
And so I just find that
in the household
home's just
or with your
yeah,
friends?
well, household and friends, eh?
Yeah.
So I just find that, when I think of New Zealand and what is home, it's like, for me, it's just a place with amnesia. Like, we've lost the roots of where we come from. The systems and stuff we have in place is completely antithetical to sort of those traditional values. It's just, it's
Yeah.
inverse.
Well, in a roundabout way, I mean, as you know, I do a lot of creative work, and a lot of my photography and my writing, sort of fiction writing, and that really does come back to the question of what is home.
Mm,
Yeah, I did this exhibition a couple of years, exploring home and photographing houses in Wellington and parts of New Zealand, and sort of you look at them and you go on Google Maps and you go to somewhere like Dannyverk or Palmerston North, and you just drop a pin and you look around, and besides the cars parked on the street, it might as well be the 1960s. It really, there's no fundamental change to the infrastructure or the configuration of New Zealand as a country, in terms of the towns and the cities. And there's something very quaint and nostalgic about it. Maybe amnesia is another way of talking about it, but it's profoundly nostalgic when you go, not so much Auckland, but everywhere else in the country. It's like you've just time travelled back to this long lost Robert Muldoon history, and nothing has really moved on. And you can see it as well when you go to somewhere like Australia, which has always been the classic comparison. And I don't think that's true anymore. You can't compare New Zealand and Australia because Australia is actually a wealthy nation.
mm.
And I go back 10 years later and they've built an entire new metro network in Sydney. They've built whole new airports and suburbs, and look, there's a whole thing there around the resource and mineral assets that they're sitting on. But
Let's say.
it's like, man, I don't think there's a new road that's been built anywhere in New Zealand ever. Maybe Transmission Gully, but it's just this kind of malaise. And if you're not moving forward, though, in the fiat world, you're moving backwards. We're not just sort of hobbits trying to take it easy because we're not sitting on any true wealth, except
Yeah.
maybe some rotting wooden houses. So it's like we're in this dilemma, Ben. I don't know. It's sort of strange.
It is, but I am deterministically optimistic about the future in the sense that, you have this sort of top-down authority coming to this ultimatum essentially when they've just lost a lot of trust from the whole COVID lockdowns and, this vaccine will stop infection and transmission and then that doesn't and then this one will and one mask doesn't work but three does and do you know what I mean? They've just
Yeah.
lost a lot of confidence and if we reflect upon that and the colonial bank issue, like we are talking about in that first one,
Yeah.
it's that loss of confidence, that loss of trust is what makes that system crumble. And the more that that system crumbles in the face of, Bitcoin is getting the price that they deserve, it just means that they have more capacity to actually make meaningful change. So I think it's going to get a little rocky, but, it's necessary to actually bring the change that we're sort of wanting to see.
Yeah. Did you see that interview with Adrian Orr? There's a lady, Madison Reedy from the New Zealand Herald,
I
who
did.
grilled him. I
Oh,
thought
yeah.
that was pretty incredible. And he had another slip up a few weeks earlier. You might have seen James Vigiano did that little clip of him talking
Yeah,
about, knock on wood, we print money and people believe it, and that went
exactly.
viral all over the internet.
And that was just a joke. It was just bad humor. I know you guys are struggling with the high cost of living and high unaffordable houses for younger generations, but I hope you believe
Knock
it.
on wood. But those two things in particular, and I mean, Madison didn't even bring up Bitcoin. It was Adrian who brought up Bitcoin and said, it's not a store of value, it's not a medium of exchange. And he was like, almost this Streisand effect emerged because he's saying Bitcoin even though he wasn't prompted to.
Yes.
And what are your thoughts on that whole scenario, situation, and how that's played out?
Well, there's the first thing I would say, just in regards to trying to delineate between store of value and medium of exchange. Like, it doesn't make sense to actually try and do it in the sense that all money is a medium of exchange, and you're either going to spend it now or like delay spending it now to spend it at a later date because it, reduces future uncertainty because you have the money should anything pop up, you know. So it's about spending it now or spending it later, but spending nonetheless. But obviously, the role of savings is incredibly important. So, like, the fact that they keep bringing it up, whether in that interview or they've also just released the future of money. A few months ago, there's this new set of articles, and even there, they're still bringing it up. We have to tackle these challenges because of these new assets essentially that are coming up. And so they talk about stability, right, and security. Um, but what good is secured loss? Where it's guaranteed 2% loss of your wealth every year, and if you have that compounding, it's not long until you've lost 50% of your wealth. It's a matter of 10 years. So it's very interesting that they keep bringing it up themselves. And then the fact that they're trying to like define what money is and also really struggling to sort of do that. Like in the latest article, money is what people receive when they get paid in their wages, receive financial support from the government, sell something to their neighbor, or get a gift from their friend. That's what they define as money. So it's just incredible. And so they actually break it down to two types of money, where it's central bank money or private money. So central bank money is like any of the money that's actually physical, which is wrong because you have gold coins, you have silver coins, you have various bearer assets. Just because it's physical doesn't mean it has to come from, some authority. And then they're talking about central bank issued digital money or private issued digital money. So it's hilarious that we find ourselves in this position again, where it's like they are the ones that are putting their own framing around the risks of it, and are trying to compete with it where we know that they can't because they have debt obligations. And the only way they can satisfy that debt obligation is to literally print you debt. And as we saw in that first sort of article that we talked about last time, when they go to print that new debt, they are aware and explicitly said, we're aware that this will make house prices increase and stuff. And then to sort of tame that problem that they create, they're saying, we know that we have to make more unemployment, and that's a side effect of raising interest rates. So, like, it's a lose-lose situation for them. They're just perpetually losing confidence the more that they extract. And the fact that there's this ultimatum at the end where you're going to have to choose between two antithetical systems, Bitcoin or like the CBDC social credit system, after they've just completely destroyed all of that trust. Well, knock on wood, that people choose what's best for them.
Yeah, people keep believing, right? And
Well, until they don't.
well, I mean, you don't. The thing is, you don't need to believe. You can just look at the code and run your own node, and
Exactly.
it works, right? And just on that note, Ben, a listener actually forwarded me a article. I don't usually read mainstream news, but a press release from the Reserve Bank talking about how the Reserve Bank considers the digital dollar ended money must innovate to stay relevant. And this was a piece quoting the director of money and cash at the RBNZ, Ian Woolford,
Yes.
and he said, with this new, New Zealand digital dollar, you could use it to do things like make an instant digital payment to anyone in New Zealand. Today, New Zealanders still cannot make instant payments electronically to other people unless they are both with the same bank. And that, unquote, but that is really funny because I'm sure I just did that yesterday with something called the Lightning Network. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yeah. Cody, if we actually look at good old Ian Wolford's history on LinkedIn, he's got two things on there. One is the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, and before that, he was an advisor to the executive director at the IMF.
Oh,
Joy. Love to
oh,
see that. Love to see that heading up the future of money in Aotearoa.
I have actually emailed him in good faith. These people are accessible to a degree. The Reserve Bank, I think maybe they might have been a bit burnt by getting Madison to grill. Maybe they underestimated what she was capable of. But I maintain kind of a positive, optimistic attitude. And I said to Ian, I emailed him and I said, "Hey, mate, you're actually wrong. I'm happy to do just a demonstration of what's possible with the Lightning Network." There's some really cool startups emerging in New Zealand already that interface with the fiat side, so Lightning to fiat. One in particular, Lightning Pay, which is really cool, that's coming out. And so I said, look, mate, you obviously just haven't seen this, so look, if you want to jump on a call, let me know. So we'll see. He might just spam archive me. These people are a bit funny like that. But if he wants to get in touch, I am so keen, because at the end of the day, if the RBNZ actually took this on board, don't try and DIY it. Don't roll your own crypto. Actually, just take the Lightning Network, take some of this open source tech, and you're good to go. But it's sort of
I
like,
think
yeah,
I was going to say, I think that's a very hopeful sort of outlook. Perhaps naive might be a bit
yeah,
of
man,
an apt word. I'll take the other side of that coin, and I think this is something that's been planned for a very long time. You look at the IMF's role with Agenda 2030. You look at what they get to gain from the special drawing rights and everything. Like this has been a carefully designed plan that they've been slowly encroaching towards for a very long time. So they're very aware that they're missing things out and not talking about certain things, and they're very aware of the competition that they face. So I tip my hat off to them. I don't think it's ignorance. I think it's malice, personally.
So I guess my take, yeah, absolutely, it is naivety and positivity. But I think, look, if he doesn't email me back, and if you're listening to this, Ian, because I know the Reserve Bank do monitor my podcast, they have reached out to me before. If you are listening to this, Ian, jump on a call with me, because if it's not, you're an IMF shill and you're trying to take New Zealand into the backwards days of totalitarianism. But if you do reach out to me and we get to do this lightning demo, that means you guys are open-minded and optimistic and ready to go. You just haven't seen the tech yet. So maybe those are the two roads that we've got open to us, Ben. And look,
Well, I'm
they're
all
not.
for trying to open the bridge. Do you know what I mean? I'm
Let's
all
build
for
bridges.
trying to have that conversation. I am perhaps a little disheartened because I used to, chat with the guys from Kiwi Bank and try get them on board. And this is 5 to 6, 7, 8, somewhere between that sort of time frame. Um, and they just met it with absolute hostility.
Oh, yeah.
I tried to work with the Moldy business developers for BNZ, and it's just the same. So I've tried to help people across that bridge, Cody. And now I just think it's no longer ignorance. Like we can't say it's ignorance 13 years down the track.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's see how things play out, because I think, yeah, as being away from New Zealand, I've come to realize just how much I love New Zealanders as a people.
Mm,
I think when you're there and you're sort of subjected to this narrative shaping and this kind of just bullshit agenda, there is this divisionism. But actually, New Zealanders are really good people, salt of the earth. It's kind of like the Hobbit story, right? And that gets taken advantage of, and that we saw that naivety be taken advantage of with COVID,
mhm.
and just the way people were like, oh shit, well look, we got to go for it. And you could call it statism maybe, but it was like people just trusted that they weren't going to get shafted, but they did
Yeah,
get shafted.
100%. Do you remember Jacinda saying like it's absolutely segregation, and we are the Ministry of Truth, and it's just like what we've allowed with this trust that is completely unwarranted and also kind of ironic because like it's Satoshi's opening remarks is like unwarranted trust in the system to not do exactly what they continually do. But we just find ourselves at that towards that end of that road. And that trust is just going to deteriorate so freaking quick, especially if, Cody, they don't take your bridge and try to bridge that gap. Um, because they're just
Yeah.
alienating people who are going to become wealthy.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing Lynn Alden sort of really explores, and I hadn't. I mean, I guess I knew about it in a sense, but I hadn't really intellectualized it. Was sure we get things get cheaper, such as electronics and your quality of your iPhone or your computer, but the things that are actually scarce that can't just be manufactured in a factory, things like housing in the case of New Zealand, that's actually what you need to be looking at in terms of inflation. And when you look at the continual impossibility of anybody to own a house who's maybe under the age of maybe 30 or 35, the impossibility of someone who's just working, normally even a couple working to really get on to that owning their own home in New Zealand, that is the true issue that we're facing with inflation, is that we've got a nation of renters, and then the people who are maybe owning the houses, and this isn't to get communist about it, but they're not producing anything of value, right, with that. And that's sort of the economy, is basically renting and selling houses to each other and not the things that are actually important, which should be agriculture, manufacturing, these kinds of things, right? And so
Yeah.
You
And
got
that stems to that high cost of capital.
yeah, and you've got them, this kind of arrangement, and eventually it's sort of the music stops, and people think like, for me and for you, right? We both have left New Zealand maybe for different reasons and stuff, but like I certainly was like, fuck this, getting a $25 lunch and a $6 coffee, and $550 a week for a shit box in Hataitai, Wellington. It's like that's not acceptable. And to see what you can get in Japan or other parts of the world, El Salvador, and you think, fuck, we were getting shafted. And you've got a whole generation, I don't know if you want to say chip on their shoulder, but I mean, it's like ever since 2008, and maybe a little bit before that, you've had this kind of configuration, and people have just kind of put up with it.
Yeah.
But as you talk about, the trust gets eroded. You got the Reserve Bank guy now kind of coming out, bulging from the waist, literally like this top hat banker guy.
Yeah,
And
like
people
August
like,
Carstens from the BIS just coming out.
you know,
You guys just don't like to work, you younger generations. It's like,
no,
mate.
you know what it is? It's too much avocado toast. Um, but look, man, but that's when you get into identity politics, and it becomes very messy, because I don't think that's the answer. We don't want to destroy capital. We don't want to be making the rich pay their fair share. That's not the
Correct.
that's not the logic we want to be working with, because that's destructive.
Those that are corrupt, not those that are rich. Because, like, if you think about it, in order to get rich, you have to provide, for most of us, those who aren't close to the monetary spigot, you have to provide a product or a service that helps people. And the more that they demand that product or service, the more that you can make money by being efficient at providing that product or service. So if you're rich, it actually shows that you've helped a lot of people. And under a hard money standard, that would be revered as like, here's this man who's like helped a lot of people. But under this fiat standard, it gets conflated between like rich and corrupt. And that's just because we've squeezed the middle class
Yeah.
so heavily that they have this disdain for those people.
I remember, just again, this is there's a different narratives and different kind of ideologies that are floating around. But when I was living in Wellington, and I met the landlord that I was renting off, and they were involved with various government departments. They had a long track record working in the public sector, and they, multiple homes, a house in Auckland, a house in Wellington, and just their entire existence, their kind of way of being, you could see the communism coming through, because they had directly benefited from being high up in senior roles in the government, in this kind of bureaucratic communist complex of the state. And there's no market forces that affect them. There's no free market or need to be productive. And they were the people who were able to own the places that the productive capital, because I've always, ran my own business. I was sort of subservient to that. And there was sort of just this mismatch there, which again, I wouldn't call it resentment as such. That kind of gets a bit more Marxist, right? But it's like, what the fuck, you've got this unproductive parasite class who are like owning things, and then you've got the actual productive entrepreneurs and young people who are subservient to that. And then the young people are like, oh, look, this whole thing about creating value doesn't seem to be working. I'm going to give up and go and get a job at MPI or MBIE or Ministry of Education, and I'm going to join them. If you can't
Parasite
fight them,
class.
yeah, I'm going to go join the parasite class, because the incentives are there for it, right?
Yeah.
And there's big layoffs at the moment, so there's a bit of a reset for the parasite class. But even then, that's just the work. That's still people who are creating value within the parasite class. The actual puppeteers of it all are still getting paid out of taxpayers' pockets. So,
Oh, for sure. And
we
it's just
sound
funny
like a bunch of revolutionaries, man.
well, if not us, then who? And it's
Yeah.
funny that you sort of use the word communism, because I used to be exactly the same. Like, oh, it's this very negative term. They just want stuff for free. It's really about savings, specialization, division of labor, rah rah rah. And I was speaking to sort of Eric Kaysen about it, because I was reading his book, and he was saying, it's the state capitalism that's this issue. It's talking about like this bastardized version of capitalism. And I reached out to him. I was like, brother, what's going on? Should you not have used like the word socialism or communism there? Would that not have been more apt? Because like, there's nothing capitalistic about it. It's not free markets. Do you know what I mean? It's not laissez-faire. And he goes, it's funny that you're condemning communism and saying that like capitalism is bastardized, when the word communism is sort of bastardized too. And if you really think about the Bitcoin revolution, it is kind of communistic in the sense that we are expropriating the means of production from the parasite class, which we are. We're taking away the monetary spigot from under their control. And what flows down from that is sort of like the educational, the legal, the communicational systems, right? That's how they manage to create the monopoly and maintain it, is because of the monetary monopoly. The only difference is, rather than expropriating it and using it for ourselves, it's actually going to nobody. So we are expropriating those means of production from them, but rather than using it and wielding it against the rest of the population, we're making sure that no one else can.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because if you do come back to some of the, the works of Marx and the idea of class warfare, and his original story was, the proletariat and the bourgeoisie.
Yes.
But actually, it is everyone versus the parasite class, I think, in the Bitcoin standard. And I think
Yeah.
people just shit on it straight away, but there's actually some tidbits in there that are, kind of interesting and useful to explore and to have in your paradigm of sort of what is taking place right now, because you're right, it's fixing it so that it can't happen again, whether it's what happened with COVID or with this money printer. And it was actually funny, that interview that Madison did, there's a photo of Adrian Orr, the governor of the Reserve Bank, with the little, what would you call it, the accelerator thing on the ship where you sort of like set the full steam ahead or reverse and that sort of thing. And it had his inflation targets on it. And he just unironically was standing there with it 1%, 2%, with this like handle of the great ship of New Zealand, as if somehow he, in the ninth floor of the Reserve Bank, could make that decision and make that happen. And it's almost like the God complex that we talked about last time, that they think they're a demigod of the forest by,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, they're now calling themselves kaitiaki and stuff like that, and it just infuriates me because it's literally you grinding out the middle class through this high cost of capital and this, Austrian business cycle like that we've talked about, which is manipulating the interest rates and money supply. Because you're doing this, like you're not being a guardian of anything. You're distorting price signals, so we're wasting resources. People can't save and get ahead, so we don't have the specialization division of labor. We just have people that are just high time preference trying to make ends meet. And that's all great up until a point. And that's the difference between sort of the short term and the long term debt cycles, is like you can keep doing that, but up until a point, that confidence collapses. And I think we are getting relatively close to that point, hence them trying to have, a new Bretton Woods moment where they're like, we're now talking about the future of money, we're now talking about security and new technology. It's just funny, the terminology they call themselves and the fact that they're having to make that ultimatum.
Yeah, that's right. And you talk about Eric Carson, and I've been following his work, Crypto Sovereignty, and he does a lot of
Yes.
writing about this sort
Yeah.
of stuff and the political economy of Bitcoin and that. And one other interesting thing, again, I came up through the belly of the beast, man, like in Wellington, I did media studies, I did kind of humanities, I was sort of involved in that project. And so I kind of got to see it from the inside. And one of the things you look at with something like media studies is narrative shaping. Like literally, that was what we were studying, right? And if you break down what they're doing with the future of money, clearly it's NLP, neuro linguistic programming. They're starting to put the idea into people's brains, just like they did with COVID. You repeat the same word, safe and effective, central source of truth, single source of truth. You repeat these things enough times, and it just starts bouncing around people's brains. It's just, there's research backing all of this stuff up, right? It's just, you say it enough times, people believe it. It's how hypnosis works. It's how all these things work. And you start talking about the future of money. You start talking about the way they're shaping things. And I don't think they're that competent. Like, we can poke holes in it. But for the average person who's getting their TV1 news or their Radio New Zealand, maybe Madison's doing a good job with the New Zealand Herald, giving a bit of a counterpoint, but it's like mainstream media are going to be gobbling this up and disseminating it to people's brains.
Yeah.
And people start thinking, yeah, future of money, digital kiwi dollar is going to fix
Yeah.
all our problems, right?
Social credit system sounds good.
There used to be
Sounds secure.
a party back in the day called Social Credit in New Zealand. Do you know?
No, I didn't hear about that.
Back in the maybe the 80s. There was, I'll see if I can find it, because there was a period there where New Zealand was going through some real big questions. You know, you had sort of the Robert Muldoon years, and then you had, the Social Credit Party, which was from the 1950s to the 1980s, which is kind of like maybe pre-Green Party, sort of in that space. But yeah, I mean, this is, we're coming back to old ideas, kind of recycling
Yeah,
things here. But
exactly. I think you're right in the sense that they're not that competent, and we sort of saw that with that first wave. Um, we had the whole COVID stuff going on at the same time. We had the Digital Council of Aotearoa, and it was this guy, Mitchell Pham, who was a young global leader. The whole World Economic Forum pre sort of groomed selected people,
they
which
like
of
grooming young people.
yeah,
There's something about that.
funny that.
Yeah,
Which
right.
Jacinda was one as well.
Yeah.
And we just mocked them until they just gave up. Like we literally took the piss out of them on every post that they did, and they stopped. They ceased to function. And so now that we know that old mate is an IMF shill, and well, I'll wait. I'll hold my breath and see if he reaches out to you. But like the best way to do it is to ostracize them too, and that's what Eric said as well. Is to bring humor into it because like this is a peaceful revolution, and the only way to get eyes is to actually have just such apt humor, where you can't help but get involved. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it is hilarious, and it's also what Kaysen was saying in regards to like crypto and cryptography. I don't know if you've read that part of the book yet. Where it's just so funny that the word cryptography has been bastardized, and now people conflate it with shitcoins. And it's ironic because like the underlying message is to conceal that message by obfuscating or not being able to find it. And so that's literally what cryptography is. And the fact that we conflate it with shitcoins is the hidden message.
Yeah.
And so it is hilarious to watch that play out.
Yeah. No, man, it's there's a lot of stuff happening. I think on the optimistic side, though, because New Zealand is small enough, and I look at the
Mm,
irony of, my show's getting more and more listeners. I got people reaching out to me, and I have a lot of responsibility, I think, for that I'm beginning to really comprehend, because you've got the likes of News Hub, classic mainstream media, shit house, going under. And,
I
you
didn't know it
would,
was going under.
yeah, man, the 6 o'clock News Hub, I think that's either already finished or finishing very soon. They're all out of jobs. And these were the guys who were, the 6 o'clock, that you go to for the latest in the world and in New Zealand. And so on one hand, you've got these classic legacy media outlets falling over. And then on the other hand, you've got people going to things like podcasts, going to Stacking News, going to Nostr, to actually
Yes.
get the truth.
Get on Nostr.
Yeah, and I don't know. There's just something to be said about that kind of dynamic, because even you got people, got the halving coming up tomorrow, and I think there might have been something on Radio New Zealand about it, and they
Okay.
they got it wrong. They just, it's like a soundbite, and it's like, all right, let's sit down and talk about this for an hour and a half on the show.
Yeah.
And that's what you get when you're in Bitcoin podcast land. You get deep dives. There's
Yeah.
nowhere to hide, and
Yeah.
you kind of have to own up to things, right? Whereas if you're in that sort of one to many broadcast legacy format, you can just say, yeah, Bitcoin, there's going to be half as much Bitcoins, and your Bitcoins are all going to get stolen from FTX by Sam Bankman-Fried, and people
Yeah.
are, oh, okay, that's it. I'm not going to buy any Bitcoin. Whereas you come on to the new media, you come on to Nostra, you come on to podcasts, you come on to whatever, and it's like, yeah, I'm going to zap that. This is the signal. You come to a bit
Yeah.
Kiwi, whatever. You come to a Madeira, you come to El Salvador, you find out what's actually going on. And I mean, that hasn't really disseminated, but I think it's starting to get out there,
Good.
but we'll
Well, the
see.
fact that legacy media is dying because people are watching it less, right, is a good signal that things are changing. And New Zealand being as small as it is, like if you don't have that iron sharpening iron, what you get on Nostr and everything, like you have to validate whatever claims you make, if you're a high enough profile. Otherwise, if you're just shit posting, no one cares. But we saw it when, Jacinda would go travel and people would be hurling abuse at her. We saw it the other day on News Hub, ironically, harassment experienced by nearly 100% of New Zealand politicians. Like, people are getting pretty fed up. And what you're trying to do is trying to be like, hey guys, here's a way to bridge that gap because otherwise what you're experiencing is only going to heighten the more that we get down this path.
Yeah, I mean, part of the other stuff I'm looking at, you might have seen this, Ben, but I'm really interested, again, having kōrero, having
Mm.
conversations, building bridges, having wānanga about this stuff. I want to be sharing what I know with these people, and I've been doing a bit of article writing, just talking about the Bitcoin scene in New Zealand and sort of doing a briefing, the kind of thing that a politician could read and be like, okay, that makes sense in my legacy framework. I can see what this means.
Yeah.
I've been doing the podcast, obviously, trying to reach out to people. I had a few sort of semi tangential conversations with people doing stuff like I had the Calder Kiwi Saver guys on who are, TradFi as it gets, but they have a Bitcoin fund, right? And I thought, okay, well, look, that's the car pie, that's good work, guys. I want to talk about this. Please don't put any shit coins in there, but let's keep it Bitcoin. That's a
Is
really
that the
good
one
start.
though where it's they're talking about like the carbon credits and stuff at the same time and it's got to
Yeah,
be
yeah. But I said to
neutral?
him, look, man, you don't need to put that in there because it's already carbon negative. It's
Yeah.
saving the world, right? So, but like, it's a start. I don't want to
Yeah.
shit on him. He's done a good start. And these are the people we need to be building bridges with, because Bitcoin is, we already get it. But it's
Yeah.
like, okay, extending, we're all in the same waka, to use another one, but like, it's like, look, let's get on with it. New Zealand's too small to be fucking around. Let's build Bitcoin mining as an export industry. Let's get Bitcoin onto the Reserve Bank's asset sheet. Let's stop fucking around with the money. Just move to Bitcoin
Nah,
standard.
I don't want that.
No?
In the sense that I don't want it to be top down from the state. I want the RBNZ and the state to get the price that they deserve, which I think is very fucking high. I want the plebs who understand permaculture, like you're saying, where you're kind of drawn and you understand it because you want a sort of sovereign capacity. I want those people to get the price that they deserve way before I want, old mate from the IMF getting involved.
Yeah. I mean, look, that's a good point, man. I think in hyperbole, I think I'm talking about that. The reality is, yeah, it does need to be grassroots, but there is a point where the two sides meet, right? The tunnel meets on both
Mm,
sides of the mountain, right? And I think
yeah.
if it's the kind of thing that they double down on and it
Well,
gets
they
more
will.
difficult, then it's like, okay, look, we'll fight, But I'd be much more like, look, we get some Bitcoiners in there, and they're like, look, guys, sorry, because all I want, is it's like, all right, we were wrong. I'm sorry, guys,
I
refunds
get
for,
that, but I just think it's more of like a dog backed into a corner and
yeah,
you're expecting it to behave rationally. And that's why I sort of commented on like, oh, is that the green and carbon neutral guys? Because what they're trying to do, in my opinion, is they're trying to steer that Overton window where it's like, we'll let you have Bitcoin as an asset in the ETF, right? But we won't let you have it self-custodially in the sense that if we have it in the ETF, and that's why I'm not, pro BlackRock having a whole lot of it, is because having exposure to it, but in a trusted manner where that trust is very unwarranted, completely neuters the value proposition in the sense that it's a bearer asset. The whole point is to be a bearer and have no counterparty risk, to be able to save and spend on your terms, not on someone else's. And so when I see these people trying to make, oh, it's this carbon neutral fund, or we can put it on this balance sheet, and then we can have exposure to it in this way. Well, we're just bringing in the same problems of centralization that we're trying to escape from.
yeah, that's a good point, man. I wouldn't say I have like a strong opinion in any direction here. I guess I look at I look at the human side of it, the human action, the connectivity, and
Mhm.
there is certainly something to be said that a lot of people, and these would be the people who wore the masks, there is, it's like a personality type. It's like in people, and it's not in other people that when there is an authority involved and they kind of implicitly sign off on something, then it becomes okay. And I think what I'm seeing is to reach that market of people, if it was under the, in the shadows, in the crypto shadows, then they'll be like, oh, I'm not interested. But if it's like, oh, yeah, did you know that you can get this in your KiwiSaver? And then they're like, okay, cool. And now I'm going to teach you how to self custody. I think
I get what you're
there's,
saying. You're going to
I,
meet them at their map of the world and
yeah,
then help them along that sort of Bitcoin hero's journey to sovereignty. but initially meeting them with convenience. And furthermore, I think that, what you were just saying about the filter that these people have for the large majority, and I'll just read this because I think it's a bit apt, so excuse me. It says, people who can't defend themselves physically, um, pass information through a consensus filter as a safety mechanism. They literally do not ask, is this true? They ask, will others be okay with me thinking this is true? This makes them very malleable to brute force manufactured consensus. And it's so true. These people that,
Is that Eric Casson? Or,
no, no, it isn't. Love the guy, but
yeah.
not going to give him credit for everything.
No, no, no.
It's just some 4chan thing, but it's so true in terms of like how many people filter things, and we learned that with COVID and stuff too. It's like no real critical thought. But will mum and dad be okay if I have this opinion? Will my friends, ostracize me for having this opinion?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, man, I've seen that play out just in my personal life, and it sounds like you had a slightly different experience. But for me, hardcore COVIDians have certainly sort of seen the error of their ways. And
Mm,
at the same time, in my family and friend circle, and then in the same period, they've seen what Bitcoin can do. And now with
that's
number go up and stuff, it's also like, oh, yeah, they're coming back to it. And so I'm not sort of absolutist in that sense. Like, I think I certainly am optimistic that the COVID thing, that couldn't happen again to that degree. And things have moved on so much now that it's, and in both senses, right? So for the normal people, they wouldn't just take it hook, line, and sinker like that. And on the other hand, the way that we took over Parliament for 23 days, that now isn't, unfortunately, that isn't as easy as it was, because anytime anything happens, they throw up the concrete barricades and they don't let you go in like they did back when there was the occupation. So it was like there's been a change of dynamics there,
mhm.
and maybe the climate stuff, maybe they could pull some things, but I think the cost of living it now is so real for people
Yeah.
that the questions are going to be asked. Oh shit, how much is this actually going to cost us? You know?
Hope that's the case.
I
Again,
hope so.
I
Yeah.
I'm gonna put my strong position held lightly. I'm not an absolutist in any way, sense, shape, or form. But I do think that that climate one will be next, and you'll see the exact same thing play out. Unfortunately, you'll be labeled, right wing extremist or whatever it is if you don't fall for that narrative. And we now have to have carbon taxes, or you're killing the world, and you shouldn't have children
Mm,
because of the carbon of it. I
mm.
think you'll be surprised. It's just like the next thing. You know what I mean? You know how there's
Yeah,
that
man.
meme where it's
Yeah.
like the NPC just putting the next chip into the back of their head.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you'd be surprised at how often that happens.
Well, I mean, the other thing is, I mean, just thinking broadly here, but what does a unifying figure look like here? Because I think even just the political cycle, I mean, we've moved away from some of the extremist stuff in New Zealand, and I think a lot of countries are coming into election cycles this year. And
Mm.
so, what was it, red party, blue party, purple party? It's all the same, but you are seeing maybe a slight difference there where the radical left wing kind of communist thing, which was coming out of New Zealand, has gone away. And it just sort of
Mm.
evaporated. And now it's a bit more like, oh shit, just building roads and stuff. And I mean,
It always does around election time, though, brother.
yeah,
It always does around election time. And as soon as they've been elected and they're in for a year or two, look out.
yeah,
Of the lesser, the lesser of the evils, choose neither.
yeah,
So choose the orange pill, choose the purple pill, meaning Nostr,
yeah.
and those are the only votes that are really going to matter, and where you live.
I guess where I was getting at though is there an opportunity for in the media kind of space where there is a bit of a lull in this kind of attack on the senses that we were seeing just up until recently. It feels like it's kind of pulled off a little bit. Is that now in New Zealand news hubs going away? You've got who reads that shit anymore? Is there an opportunity for an alternative voice that is Bitcoin based, Nostr based,
I think,
decentralized to emerge?
oh, for sure, there's the opportunity for it. What I think we should focus on is getting those people to Nostr. Don't even mention Bitcoin. Just being like, hey, we see that you had this article back then, and that we saw that it had a bit of censorship, and that you kind of got a little bit deplatformed. Like, hey, here's this new social media protocol essentially that you can be on that will never happen again. So it'd be a really sturdy foundation for you to build on.
Well,
Because what's kind of baked into that is the ability for them to get zaps and stuff. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
So nos the pill first.
Yeah, well, and along those lines, so I know James Vigiano has started NZ on Nostr, sort of a bit of I think, referencing NZ on air,
Oh,
and
okay.
it's sort of this idea that, it's uncensorable. You can have this outlet for sharing what's going on locally. And then also last year, I caught up with the Free Speech Union in New Zealand, and had a catch up with them about sort of their work, which is very much based, it's Bitcoin thinking, it's Nostr thinking. And maybe I need to just email them again and catch up and say, hey, let's talk about Nostr again, because, it is uncensorable, can't be stopped. And that extends to money as well. You can't stop a Bitcoin transaction. So I think
Unless it's
maybe there's some routes there, on the edges that we can reach people through.
100%. Again, meeting them at their map of the world and just finding the best pieces to place to sort of bring them along that hero's journey. I'm actually writing a book based off Joseph Campbell's work, The Hero with a Thousand Faces.
Yeah.
Yeah, he went round and sort of followed all of these different tribes all around the world and studied all of their mythology and found there's an overarching monomyth, meaning that they have this singular sort of thesis that they all have in common. And he distilled this into this one page, which was called the Golden Thesis in Hollywood. So they use it in like The Matrix and Star Wars and Harry Potter, like all of the popular films, where it's just like separation. The individual finds themselves sort of isolated, just starting to wake up and see what's happening around them. Initiation, you go through some trials and tribulations to sort of find out who you are and how you can help others. And then you get to return and you get to take that message home and actually help people. And I just find that that is so apt in the Bitcoin sphere in the sense that you find these people that have got the price that they deserve, which means that they've had to understand the environment they've found themselves in. And then through running a node, through doing, the 1,000 hours plus work of study, to actually grok it, they get the price they deserve. And then they get to return home to all of the people that are struggling, like the middle class getting squashed out, and be like, hey, this thing literally solves that. So I think it's just awesome to see like you and all of these other Bitcoiners like Tip and James literally going through that whole process. Super inspiring and makes me super hopeful.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So you're writing a book. How's that coming along? You sort of,
It's good, brother. I don't know if I'm much of a writer because I'm really like literal.
yeah,
I don't know why. I'm very like kind of direct, but I've got over 100 pages ready. Having a few people starting to look at it now. I
yeah,
think Kaysen said he was going to have a read after he finishes his skiing trip and
yeah,
probably grill me over a few things because of the bastardized terminology that I use,
yeah,
but we'll
yeah.
find out.
Yeah, well, and I think if, even just some of the stuff we talked about last time with the New Zealand connection, King Tawhio, and just sort of
Mm,
bringing it back home, because I think certainly that New Zealand has something in it. There's a seed, a whakapapa
yes,
of story there that has sort of been covered over and sort of
yes.
maybe sort of forgotten temporarily. But
Have
this
that
idea,
amnesia again.
yeah,
Like our literal founding treaty had like the word Kawanatanga, which meant to be self-governing, right? And what stems from that is because it's the same reason why many tribes didn't see King Tawhio as their king, because they valued consent. They're like, we don't want to take orders. We have this tribal relationship, and if you don't like it, you can leave, but it's voluntary. And then we find ourselves in this involuntary world where those imposing those rules are literally calling themselves kaitiaki. So it's just like this place of amnesia. We've completely forgot our traditional values. No one foundationally values consent under the status system anymore. And it's hilarious
yeah,
in the
man,
sense that we're coming to this ultimatum, brother, and you're going to have to choose complete slavery or complete freedom and responsibility. And
yeah.
everyone's going to have to make that choice at the price they deserve.
Yeah, no, it's powerful ideas, man, and I think I'm looking to do what I can to help people You know, I'm doing this show. I'm trying to talk to everyone I can, trying to build the lifeboats, as you know. And there's many others out there who are doing this work as well. And I think we're going to win, man. It's just going to be a bit of work.
What kind of sucks is that King Tafio was right in the sense that he tried to build that full reserve banking system. That's why he had to go to petition to the Queen because you're competing against this corrupt reserve bank. Or sorry, like partial reserve. Do you know what I mean?
Fractional
And
reserve,
so,
yeah.
like, yeah, fractional reserve bank. It's like you're never going to be able to compete on a long basis if the people who are your customers don't understand why they're not getting yield. It's because they're not also having their money diluted. But they didn't grok that at the time, and they fell for the trap. And we
Yeah.
saw the same thing play out with Custodia Bank in the US. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No.
But the Fed just shut them off. Like, nope, you want to be a full reserve bank? Like, we're just going to put up brick wall after brick wall and not allow you to establish that at all.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny, man, coming back to it, like, I mean, I've been looking at BIP 85, which
Okay.
allows you to do deterministic child wallets. And I've been looking at just that sort of thing for, older family members and kind of this, people who can self-custody but maybe need a bit of help. And I'm like, man, that is basically being a bank for your hapu, for your family, for your friends and stuff. And
Yes.
you can do it. It's obviously a trusted position, and there's a lot of responsibility in that. But it's like, wow, this isn't an Australian bank anymore. This isn't the guy in the Reserve Bank, making the decisions. It's me taking absolute
Yes.
responsibility. And these people know where I am, so it's like I can't really run away with it, right? So there's just new models of options available. There's new things you can do. And yeah, the hero's journey you talk about. I mean, a book that really inspired me is King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, which is sort of talking about these masculine archetypes and sort of
Hmm.
the way they all interplay. Because it's sort of maybe in New Zealand, this is a bit closer to our hearts. I think we really can see this. We're a little bit closer to the land, but the
Yeah.
sort of
More local.
the roles of man and how that is actually subverted quite a lot in the modern world. We become these kind of eunuchs, right? Running on, taking the train, going into the building to get the fiat. And and coming back to Marx, he talks about wage slavery.
Yeah.
And, you're working for paper. It's not even paper
Exactly.
anymore.
Yeah, you have your time, your most finite asset, right? And with that time, you're having to earn money so that you can buy other people's time, like whether they've grown that food or what have you. But the unit that you're measuring your time and their time with is someone else's paper. And if you look at like the paper in New Zealand, they changed it on the 100-year anniversary, like we spoke of, from King Tawhito to Captain Cook. You look at the US dollar bill, it has the pyramid with the all-seeing eye. It's literally, and they call us cultists, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the funny thing that I just wanted to mention, just because you're talking about you being the bank, is again, you're bringing in that level of trust, which for your case with your family, it's probably a bit warranted.
Yeah.
They're not so familiar, that's not a problem. But it's literally just writing down 12 words.
Yeah.
So you can use like these little cards,
Yeah.
these little seed picker cards, and all you have to do is find two different pairs and write down 12 words, and then you've got it. You might want to use a hardware wallet to do a checksum for your last word, but it's not difficult. It's
Yeah.
not difficult at all. So like the only qualm I have with making these trusted models where it's like one person or a few people in charge of someone else's putia is that while you may be a good kaitiaki of your family's putia, it's one less door that the state may have to knock on. Do you know what I mean? But if it's distributed, like the whole strength of Bitcoin and its decentralization and distribution of nodes, if those people are distributed to every single person, writing 12 words, and then they come knocking on your door like, we want your money. Well, what for? You've taxed my wages. You tax me every time I spend money. You tax me through inflation. You tax me through property. You tax me when I die. You tax me left, right, and center. Why do you need this money that's just being put aside? Or just, oh, sorry, mate, lost it.
Yeah. I was
Got it.
I was out fishing on the lakes. um,
Exactly.
yeah, man.
You
Look,
don't want to centralize it.
yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, I think there is nuance around what that means, in terms of lightning and the relationship with custodians and that. But at the very least, it's a much, much better state of affairs than Adrian Orr with his speedometer of the boat, the great ship of Aotearoa, that he's trying to steam towards that inflation target. And we have the tech, we have the people. It's just a bit of work, a bit of proof of
And I
work.
guess you're right too, in the sense that you're meeting them at their map of the world, you're making it convenient for them, and then during that tenure, they're getting exposure to proper savings in a fiat world, which will warrant them actually taking self-custody. So I understand that sort of
Yeah,
trade-off. Again,
yeah.
strong opinions held lightly.
Absolutely. But man, I am keen just to maybe wrap up on what's sort of next for you and what you're excited about, I guess, for 2024. I mean, the year only really starts when the halvening finishes, but like what's on your roadmap for this year? Have you got any other travel or conferences, things like that planned? Like what's up?
Well, I met a great Bitcoiner from the Caribbean who wants me to come out, but I don't know if that'll be this year or next. But me and Eric have decided that we're going to throw these events called Hobo Barbecue every year, and it's like you turn up, you bring whatever goodies and steaks or beers, whatever you want. You cook it yourself. There's no one that's going to be talking to you. When you come, you chuck a phone in a Faraday bag because no one wants to be recorded. And what we found was that we had all of these amazing Bitcoiners who I won't dox, will come around and have a good time. And so we're going to do that once a year and just start building that web of trust. And so what I'm excited for is building tools on Nostr to sort of verify that web of trust. So maybe it's Cody and I go, Gigi follows you and he vouches for you. So therefore, you have a higher level of trust if I am just meeting you and you're a NIM. Do you know what I mean? Because that's the sort of things we need to build out. Synonym slash tags from Cavallo's trying to do it through Hole Punch, which will be interesting as well. But that's what I'm bullish on is that these tools on Nostr, there's a few things I can't divulge too much, but essentially think of Unchained Capital, but each pleb can do it on Nostr. Maybe not the lending, but like the backup keys type of thing. There's so many cool tools that are coming. Super bullish on that. And then I'd have to give out a shout out to sort of the company I work with now, Amber App. We just dropped a V2, which is a Lightning wallet. And though it's custodial, you don't need to tie your KYC to it. So you can send and receive, not tie any KYC to it. And we're adding more features down the track where you can send it to a vault or send it on chain and withdraw it once it's enough sats. And so you're never going to have to touch these rails. And so maybe, in a few years' time that gets, torn down because the state arches its back and it's the dog in the corner sort of thing. But by that time, we would have built better tools and it'll be on Nostr and you just won't be able to stop it. It's not going to be on the App Store. Everyone has access to the internet. Good luck. So super bullish on Bitcoin is building stuff. And also just super bullish on people just acting in their own interest when that ultimatum comes between complete slavery or complete freedom.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And I can certainly, it's funny, we're almost simultaneously discovering things because you talk about web of trust. And that's very much what I'm looking at now. That's worked really well with the New Zealand community around the builders that are there. It sort of, invite someone to the group and you sort of vouch for them. And it really means you don't get this kind of sort of Damocles of have we got feds in the chat? Have we got, people who shouldn't be here who are sort of maybe nefarious, these kinds of questions. And so I think maybe as things get adversarial, that is very valuable, but also it's just like it kind of filters out the shit, right? So real life communities as well as digital communities using things like Web of Trust, moving away from social media, legacy fiat media to actually look, these are the people that actually are, on signal, on point. And can we bring them around for some steaks and beers? That sounds pretty cool, man. I'd love to join. I've sort of got a little bit of travel myself planned, so maybe we can sync up at some point. But I do appreciate your time, Ben. And we as I said, we sound like a bunch of revolutionaries. We're like the founding fathers here talking about the state and central banking and how we're going to fix it. But it's also very exciting and very empowering because, I found out recently the founding fathers of the United States generally were actually really young people. You always think maybe they were like these old men, but actually, they were all in their like 20s and 30s. So Sounds
They
like
said the tree of liberty from time to time needs the blood of patriots to sort of stay thriving.
yeah.
So we're not revolutionaries in that sense
No
because it's
blood will
like
be spilt.
a peaceful
Peaceful.
revolution. Yeah.
Yeah. Nah.
So yeah,
Nah.
definitely make that distinction for the RBNZ fans that are listening.
Yeah, if you're listening to RBNZ, look, let's have a chat. It's just software, guys. Don't worry about it. Let's
Yeah.
catch up and I'll demo Lightning. But look, Ben, I appreciate your time. It's awesome to hear what you're working on and what you're working on with Amber app and your professional work. But yeah, let's keep in touch, brother.
Sounds good, brother. Take care. Until next time.
Thank you for listening. I do hope you enjoyed the show. I am codyellingham, and that was the transformation of value. If you would like to get in touch, please send me an email at hello@thetransformationofvalue.com and I will get back to you.